Hello everyone, welcome back to the Retail Tales. My name is Saurabh and I'm the host of this podcast. If you're a regular listener, you already know what this podcast is all about. But if this is the first time you're tuning in, this podcast is exclusively focused on discussing all things AI across the retail value chain. Okay, so before we start the episode today, I want to thank each one of you who tune in and listen to the podcast regularly. And a bigger thank you to the listeners who've been, sending suggestions and feedback. It's extremely valuable for me as I continue to work on growing awareness at the intersection of retail and AI. I do want to highlight a few suggestions that came in over the last 2 weeks or so. You all seem to be waiting for the next episode of the C-Suite mini-series, and you'd like me to focus on the role of a CTO. For context, for some of the other listeners, I started a C-Suite leader-focused mini-series a few episodes ago, and that first episode was focused on the role of a CFO of a retail company. Now, there seems to be a wait for a similar episode focused on the role of a CTO or a Chief Technology Officer. So for everyone out there waiting for this, I've been working on that episode. It's underway. And I'll try to get it out, let's say, over the next one or two episodes. But again, thank you for your patience, and please keep your suggestions and emails coming in. They're really valuable to me. Okay, so let's get on with this episode. So today, I have someone with me who can easily be called a data czar. If you've tuned in to some of my previous episodes, you'd have, always heard me put extraordinary amount of focus on the importance of data in a retail company's AI journey. For me, the path from AI's potential to its inevitability for a retail company is paved with data. And my guest today is one of the best data and analytics focused leaders I've had the pleasure of working and collaborating with directly. His grasp of data's transformative power for a retail company's AI journey is really second to none. He has this unique ability to break down complex challenges into smaller and much, much more manageable parts. And I believe with that kind of ability, he just is one of the best when it comes to data and analytics. He's not only one of the most trusted colleagues for me in the business, but also a mentor whose insights and guidance have shaped my professional growth. He's my go-to guru for all things perplexing in my professional life. So please join me as I welcome Roland Ehigiamusoe, or as we fondly call him, Ro, to the podcast. Ro, welcome to the show. I'm super excited to be talking to you on the podcast today.
Thank you, Saurabh. I am super stoked about this episode. I've been waiting eagerly for my chance to show up, on your couch. A lot of high praise. I hope I live up to those expectations. What I would say is the benefit has been predominantly mine in my professional experience with you the past several years. I think our collaboration has been superb, excellent, super exciting every day, being out there in the marketplace, creating fun stuff, fun experiences. And I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to share and for emphasizing data, because this is one of the core issues as we look at, companies in their journey towards, leveraging AI and generative AI for their own ambitions or transformative programs. A little bit about myself. I've been with Deloitte Consulting for 20 plus years. I'm a principal. I live in Atlanta with a wife and 2 wonderful kids. In my career, I have worked predominantly in the AI and data space. And of the 20 odd years I've been with consulting business, I have spent maybe 18 of that 20 plus years in retail and consumer products. In that time, served a large number of, Fortune 500 clients, from everything from strategy through engineering, post implementation operations, helping our clients scale and solve some of their more meaty data-related problems, and enabling some of these things that have popped up now that, while have been in the ethos for a while, referring to AI and generative AI, but have become the mainstay of conversations today. I won't bore you any longer with an introduction to myself, but I would say maybe my most interesting fact is, I love soccer so much. I haven't seen a Manchester United game in the last 4 years just because of the dismal performance, but that's a conversation for another day.
I'll have to launch another mini series just talking about Arsenal because because you're also talking to an Arsenal fan.
Mm-hmm.
But listeners, this is what I was talking about in my introduction for Ro. Data czar is written all over what Ro just said about his role. So in that light, Ro, I do want to pick your brain on the topic of data readiness for a retail company's AI journey. But before we go there, I'd love for you to share your thoughts on how AI and generative AI capabilities are currently transforming the retail industry and are poised to continue doing so even in the future.
The retail industry, as we know, has been undergoing, I would say, significant transformation. With AI and generative AI, there's an increased notion that you can further drive innovation, which enables, whether it's improved customer experiences, optimize operations, new product development, etc. But what we're seeing is that in the industry, there's a huge shift now from how do I deal with my customers in collective tranches to truly personalized engagement. And with that comes a need for deeper insights, more real-time engagement, ready, steady, go offers that keep your customers on their toes, right? For the most part, the power is in the hands of the customers today. But to be able to engage effectively, AI and generative AI actually offers us some opportunity with the advancements we see to get to that level of precision and granularity. So transforming the industry is a broad topic because there's tons of opportunities across the value chain. But the notion is that with AI and generative AI, we can really get to the crux of who the customer is, what the customer needs at every step of the journey, and how to service them with the right products, offers, options, pricing, to keep them engaged, to give them the best return on value, and to hold their loyalty. And that's the core of what we're seeing. I can give some examples very quickly. We talk about personalization. Those personalized shopping experiences, all we're using is customer data, for as an example, say purchase history, browsing behaviors, and so on, and the customer's preferences. And you can leverage AI in consuming that and then tailoring those, like I mentioned, recommendations, promotions, marketing messages to individual customers, right? Which the return is customer satisfaction and the increase in your potential sales. Another space where we're seeing AI and generative AI coming up in the retail industry is also around fraud detection and prevention. Whether you're enhancing security by identifying potentially fraudulent transactions or actions, analyzing those patterns, flagging unusual activity for review, also now drives that optimization from a loss prevention standpoint, right? You're reducing your losses, improving your operational performance, and as such also building increased trust with customers, right? It's a two-way street. So those are just a few innovations that demonstrate like where AI's transformative potentials are in the industry. But this can really span and enhance like every aspect of the retail value chain, from back-end operations to point of sale systems upfront.
Now, I mean, very rightly said, Ro. In fact, I think with the episode before the last one, I was talking about the top 5 applications of generative AI in retail, and one of those areas was personalization. Although I called it individualization, because personalization was a little bit kind of, old school. Individualization is, the whole mass to micro kind of concept. But Ro, for that to happen, retailers must pay close attention to where their data is. How are they sourcing the data? Where are they sourcing the data from? The level of maturity of their data, not just first party, by the way, but also, how they source their second party, and third party, the 2P and 3P data. So do you mind talking about some of the key components of data readiness that retailers should focus on for their AI journeys?
So I think before I get into some of the things that will need to be a focus area as we think about data readiness, right? Like what you just mentioned, where our customers, our clients are curating data sets, whether it's first party, second party, third party, right? And it's also creating the notion that that data becomes a differentiator.
Mm-hmm.
I see a point in time where, the data that is publicly available or purchasable or consumable no longer may be in its entirety the differentiator, right? Because it's available to all in the ecosystem, but it now is what you do with that data, the discipline around that, and the models you're building, right? I don't want to derail from your question, that now differentiate you in how you're engaging and what you're delivering in the marketplace, right? Because at the end of the day, your data and some of these things you build for enabling those transformative innovations become products in themselves that are a whole separate source of profitability for you as an organization. So that's a whole separate topic, I think.
Yeah.
But to your question, coming back to your question, these things, while they are ambitions, cannot be done without being data ready, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's with the data first mindset, you have to be focusing on data as a critical asset, and it's a critical requirement for success. And this means, in my mind, preparing data to be easily accessible or findable. Data should also be reliable and actionable, right, for you to analyze and make the right decisions. The components that I believe that our retail clients in general should be focusing on to optimize the utilization of their data plus include everything from data quality, right, which has to do with the accuracy, consistency of the data, right? That's what enables and engenders trust in what you're producing, and also the efficacy of the value return in leveraging that data. There's also, as you talk about the different data sources, from a data integration standpoint, you need to have your data consolidated, right? Which means I have my data from different sources available to me. So I have to kind of centralize and make sure there's interoperability across the different data types and data functions. So you're consuming data from different sources, integrating that into a central repository for that holistic analysis to happen. So you see a lot of our clients making the investment in the cloud, in data warehouses, right, from a consolidation standpoint. And then that's where we start to talk about things like consumption, right? And that's a whole separate topic in itself. Another big thing to be considered as you think about data readiness is data governance, right? Is the data secure? Have you provided the right privacy, compliance, data protection, confirming regulations, right? I may be saying that all incorrectly, but at least we know in retail there's GDPR, there's CCNA, right? Yeah. There's all of these provisions that have us being responsible in how we handle customer data, right? With responsibility and trust. And I think data governance, while it's typically not one of the funnest topics and maybe sometimes overlooked, while we know its importance, needs to get a little bit more airtime, right? Because that when you make investments in your data upfront, whether it's with the quality integration, sustaining that quality is hinged on having governance as an operational control to ensure that, we continue to do the right things and we're disciplined around the use of data, right? And I think that also fuels like the part around ethical use of data and the insights generated henceforth. Another big component is architecture, right? Like I mentioned, clients investing in warehouses or in the cloud as part of the overall tech ecosystem modernization, but getting your architecture scalable, flexible, accessible, right? Those are things that I'm sure most have heard. It's just so you can manage these high volumes of data and perform without degradation, adapting new data sources, new data types, being flexible from that perspective to enable the changes in your business strategy. And then the accessibility piece is just ensuring that, the right authorized users have access at the right time to the right type of data, right? We hear that in a lot of the solutions that are in place today, not to name names, but there's a good number of vendors who tout the fact that they've got the right architecture that also supports like governance that I just described.
Yeah.
Not to drain the list, I think the last one I'll touch on is, data literacy, right? Like, how do I train, my organization to be a data first organization? Like, how do I get that thinking across this training, this culture? You have to be able to foster some data driven culture because you are driving the notion that data is a valued and key asset, right? Which also helps you drive your strategic decision making and enables insights. And there's training programs that have to be in place, right? Whether it's training on use of, new data technologies, training on, the relevance of privacy and security, even if it's training on how to interpret the data effectively and correctly, right? These are things that have to become the muscle within the organization. And then there's how you bring all that together in an operating model, but that there's many more examples, but those are some of the top components in my mind that I feel retailers have to ensure are in place for the data to be primed and to generate like meaningful insights as they drive their business strategy.
So while you were talking about the 4 components, a thought trigger in my head, and maybe I'll ask you to explain that a little bit. I mean, at least your perspective. If I'm a retail executive listening to this or listening to you, when you are directly talking to your clients and, you going through the 4 components or the 4 critical components of data, it just feels like if I don't have the data maturity right now, or if I've just started my journey on that data maturity, the roadmap for me to do anything substantial with AI is further down the path. What would you say to that retail executive, who's pretty much thinking, well, it has to be sequential. First, I need to get my data in place, and then only I can do anything with AI.
It's a great question, and I'm not often to say great question, but this is a question we hear, or a thought or concern we hear our clients express. And the simple answer is, these are not by any means sequential activities. The beauty of leveraging AI and generative AI is like your speed to market shouldn't be entirely influenced by getting all of the data ready, right? You don't solve for the world from day one. You're going to do it in chunks. And from that iterative standpoint, in resolving all these components, you could be dealing with certain data categories. At the same time, you could be using your data as is, understanding the quality of the data to manage your expectations of the outcomes, because this is also an opportunity to leapfrog from where you are today. And what I mean by that is, like I said, you can take swaths of your data and say, hey, I feel relatively strongly about my financial data. So can I start to deliver some insights from a finance reporting standpoint? Yes, then go ahead while you're working on, say, product data separately as you're thinking about enabling, delivering the right products to market with speed. So these things don't have to be sequential. You don't have to bite like the whole chunk of data all at once. You can actually start to leverage and connect to your data where it is, but as long as it's managed with the, like I mentioned, the understanding of where that data is from a quality or maturity standpoint, then at least you can kind of manage your levels of expectations on the outcomes or insights that get generated from it, as an example. So the simple answer to that question is no. There's easy ways to leverage your data starting now, while you also put those things I described as a discipline going forward to harden the outcomes and improve the outcomes as you go along.
Yeah. No, I'm glad that you said that the way you said it, because one of the other things that I keep talking about, with my clients and even on the podcast is, look, AI journey is going to be an evolution for you. It's not going to happen overnight. And as much as possible, if you continue to put wins on the board on that journey, it is only going to gain more traction within your organization and keep making you successful. And to your point, having, starting in a place where you think data is a little bit better or more mature than the other areas, that will only enable you to put those wins on the board. I can also kind of remember, and this is again going back to our previous point around data platforms and having technology to help with the data synchronization or data harmonization. I can recall about a year ago, I was talking to this SVP of a retail company. They seem to have done, they seem to have the right data, tech, and infrastructure in place, and they were, kind of primed to scale their AI initiatives. But, talking to them over a series of 3 to 4 meetings, I realized that the tech and infra pieces weren't enough. Even with those capabilities in place, they were struggling to get their AI ambitions off the ground. Where I'm going with this is, this whole notion of relying on just your data infrastructure and technology to solve a company's data-related challenges. I know you'd agree, with having the data infrastructure in place is going to accelerate the AI journey, but that's not the end of it. So I want to know, what are your thoughts on, retail companies with enterprise data platforms in place, with the right data infrastructure in place, but still struggle with data harmonization for AI enablement? What's your advice to companies, in that or, some kind of similar situations?
I think even when companies, like you said, have invested in enterprise data platforms, right? They still face significant challenges with data harmonization, and these challenges often stems from, core issues that are inherent in, say, large-scale enterprise environments, right, and the complex nature of data itself. There's some challenges specific to data harmonization that I can rattle off, but if I take a pause, just thinking about the way you laid out the question, one of the things that continues to be a struggle is the ability to tie, IT investments, whether it's, say, in this case, the enterprise platform, with, business value outcomes or requirements and ambitions. In certain cases, I've been in client conversations where, the IT organization has made significant investments in hardening their technology platforms, right? But then how does that then tie in with the adoption of those platforms and the outcomes thereof, where the business has its priorities misaligned, right? The key thing that is required would be the right stakeholder executive sponsorship of, I would say, an idea, right? Like, here is something we want to accomplish as a goal. We want to grow or we want to cut costs, drill down. And in doing either one of those, here is a functional area that we need to go solve a problem A in, right? Say revenue generation. But to go solve that problem, then we're going to need the enabling function on the IT side to build a solution, right? And then the question is, do I have the right systems in place that can help me get there? Do I have the right data in place that will help me get there? Do I have the right diversity of data as well that will help me get there? Do I have the right quality of data that helps me solve that problem? And when I can answer yes, and that those are the basic things I would have listed as the challenges, then the question is, what value are we delivering back? How do we measure that value back to the business? If you do not have the sponsorship and the value predetermined for what the investment is, then almost to your earlier point, right? How do you then successfully engage the business in doing more? And how do you then prioritize the investments you're making in your, whether it's your IT platforms or your data enterprise platforms or in your data curation, right? So I feel like solving those pieces where, business IT integration is hinged on value, right, that is tied to desirable outcomes for the business, it is a big piece of that. And then everything else becomes is in my mind tactical, right? Where do I go find the data? Is the data ready? Do I have the right tools and techniques to deliver on the outcomes? Once you can solve for those things in a tactical matter because they're hinged on the right strategic purpose, then I think you're able to get past the challenges because the investments you make, however great, may not lead to the right outcomes if you don't have that agreement between, business purpose and solution IT outcomes.
That was well said. I know when you work with the clients that you work with, and we do have a couple of common clients between the two of us as well, you help them solve some of the most critical data-related challenges. Could you possibly talk about one of the most critical challenges faced by a retailer? And you don't have to name names, but and some of the ways that you advise that retailer to overcome the challenge.
So a challenge that comes to mind, I believe every retailer also experiences or deals with, is tied in with quality of data, right? And there's a domain that is, I would say, near and dear to my heart, and that's the item data domain. And a lot of our clients, of course, in retail space are in the business of selling products, right? And the item is the product. You would almost assume that in that case, that should be one of the more mature domains in the space. But it ends up, interestingly enough, being the most challenging, I would argue, next to customer domain.
Yeah.
So at one of my clients, again, names not to be named, and I think not just one, it's many, or at least a handful, being on that journey for many years in trying to solve the data challenges in that space. And that was really around like completeness and, the quality from a readiness standpoint always seemed to fail at every turn. And it was based on the fact that they were in a very, still are, complex legacy landscape of IT systems that use that data. And these systems are further proliferated by, multiple functions that touch that data, whether it's merchandising, marketing, finance from a reporting standpoint, and so there's a huge proliferation of data, not entirely centralized, not trusted in its quality, and being used for different purposes. And so in that journey, the goal for the client was to consolidate onto a single platform, get the data right with the quality piece, and then be able to, provide that data to all the right functions in a way in which they all need it or demand it. And that continued to be an ongoing fail. Some successes, but never really quite resolved. In helping the client address that problem, we literally had to come back to some basic foundational steps, right? Like, one, do we have the right executive sponsorship to go solve this problem? Which really then confirms the appetite to embark on the journey that they've seen as fraught with risk, having failed multiple times. And then how do we now set the plan to run a program, a roadmap that gets them from here to there? There being trusted single platform, ready data that would service both e-commerce, store, physical operations, right? And in laying out that plan, I won't go through all of the steps we went through in framing and solving for the challenge, but what I would share is this was a multi-year journey that was indeed sequential in trying to solve for the problem without impeding the business, and getting to a point where, we're starting to do things leveraging, AI and machine learning capabilities to ready the data, now that we have certain trusted sources, not entirely still consolidated in one, and solving for the appropriate business functions and servicing that data back to them. But it is still an ongoing journey. It is not fully resolved yet. And that is the most exciting and complicated example from a client. But like I said, we're seeing that same problem exist consistently across many others. In some cases, they just don't have the right technology in place, where they don't have that very massive scale of data. In some cases, we have the tools in place, we just don't have the discipline and governance to manage that data. And in certain cases, well, there's still shadow IT behaviors within business functions where folks still manage their own, legacy behaviors because they've never gone through a change management adoption process to sync everyone up, which means we didn't start with the stakeholders to ensure alignment and to push down that need for change. So it's a different set of flavors, but still the same problem at the core. So I think my most challenging and what I see more of and what I hope we can help more of our clients solve, but in that product or item space, there's a lot to be done. And we do have, as you know, we've done some pretty cool stuff, solutions that are hinged on AI, generative AI, machine learning, that expedite speed to success and solving some of the things we've just described, right? And again, I think you asked the right question earlier on. Do we have to have everything right? No. Well, we're helping you leapfrog to get to substantial, meaningful outcomes.
Yeah, it's evolution, and it's how these technologies can help you accelerate. By the way, when you started the answer, I was smiling because
I wish they could see that.
But it was one of the client projects that you and I both worked on together. So I'm like, okay, that was the most challenging one. Now I know.
Absolutely.
Look, I've had the luxury of hearing your thoughts and learning from your expertise. But I'm super excited that all of my listeners were able to, kind of tune in and listen to your perspectives on the significance of data on their AI journeys. Unfortunately, though, we are close to wrapping up this episode. But as parting thoughts, any advice for retailers who are worried about their data readiness for AI and generative AI ambitions?
This time I'll give a very short answer. My parting thoughts would be, for retailers who are beginning that journey towards data readiness, right, and leveraging AI and generative AI, the path most likely seems daunting, given the complexities of, data management, the technology involved, like all of the things that need to be orchestrated to drive to success. But like I mentioned, with a strategic approach, which is intentionality and a focused execution, right, which to me is the endurance piece, right, because it's a journey. I feel that retailers can effectively prepare their data ecosystems to support all of these AI-driven capabilities, right? It's not, to me, quite honestly, rocket science. It's about your ambition, desire, and, resilience in that journey to get there, right? As my dad will tell me, and I think we all hear it often, it's like, fail fast, fail forward. I'm not saying set yourself up to fail, but, we test and learn, right? Like, it's a journey. So my advice is really take actionable steps, do things, where we lay out like a typical pathways, assess where your current capabilities are today, right? Focus on quality, yes, but you can implement continuous processes as you go along. You don't have to solve it all today, which is around the start small and scale gradually. Right. Cultivate a data-driven culture. Folks have to understand the value of data and why it's meaningful to their organization. And I think if you follow those steps and many more things that you would hear, you can build a solid foundation for your AI and generative AI ambitions, and then leverage those technologies that actually enhance your downstream customer experiences and optimize your operations. It's all about growth.
Yeah. And remember to have fun along the way, because the journey looks daunting, but at the end of the day, if you're able to crack the code on your data and then to be able to get to that final milestone of delivering a scaled AI application which unlocks true potential and true value for your organization, that's worth the journey, right?
Yeah, a shameless plug. Call us. You know?
Yeah, call us. Of course.
You know?
Amazing. Thank you, Ro. Thank you for being on the show and sharing your invaluable insights with us today.
Thank you, Saurabh. It was a pleasure to be here, and thanks for the invitation again.
Of course, of course. All right, everyone. That was Roland Ehigiamusoe, or Ro, from Deloitte Consulting. For folks who are interested in learning more and looking to get connected with Ro, please reach out to him on LinkedIn. With that, it's a wrap on this episode of the Retail Tales. Thank you for listening. Here's me, Saurabh, signing off. If you like the content, don't forget to follow this show to keep learning a thing or two about retail AI. You can follow us on LinkedIn and subscribe to this show on Spotify or Apple. Join me in the next episode of the Retail Tales, a show which is exclusively focused on exploring all things AI across the retail value chain. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay curious.